My name is Krolikowski. I graduated from MSU in 2007 with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Theater Design and Technology. Pretty sure my emphasis was lighting design and technical direction. Since then, I haven't designed anything. But I most recently have been working as a head carpenter for the first national tour of Warhorse. While I was here at MSU, shows I was involved in were, now I have to think. Urinetown. I was the rigger for Urinetown. What else? Gypsy, I was a properties master. Lighting designed, Haiku, and what was the other show that was paired with it? Haiku and I can't think of what it was called now. Alright, I should have looked at my resume right before this. I was a technical director on Synonymy, which is a very cool project to be a part of, with Randy Wyatt. I did projections work for Proof, which is another fun show, another fun project. Also, while I was here, I worked in the lighting shop for Stephen Smith, and also in the carpentry shop for, it would have been Randy at that point. So, after I left MSU, I was actually told about a production company from Paul Finicchiaro, who had actually performed in Vegas with a guy who is now my general manager on tour. Through Networks Presentations is who I now work for. But Paul had asked me what I wanted to do after MSU, and I told him I was interested in touring, and he said, you should call this person or this person, send them your resume, and I ended up getting the job as a flyman on the Producers, a 3-truck bus and truck tour, about 3 months after I graduated from MSU. So graduated in May, and then I was on the road in late August. It was good. And since 2007, late 2007, I've pretty much been on the road nonstop since then. So about 6 years running now. Longest I've been down is about 7 months. So it's been good. It's been lucky enough to go from show to show to show, and right now I'm kind of taking a little break from that. So we'll see where that leads me.
So you just got done with...
Yeah, I just finished 14 months with Warhorse as the head carpenter for the tour, and that closed in July 1st of this year, and I don't really have anything booked at this point, so I'm kind of using this downtime as an opportunity to push myself to find new projects or work for a different producer or a different production manager, see what else is out there, as opposed to continuing to work for the same producer, just trying to get my name out into different circles, I guess you could say. You still have to hustle for work, and that's honestly something that I learned here at MSU, is that there are lots of projects available in the world, whether it be inside the four walls here at MSU or with a specific producer you work for. They may have 8 shows, but that means they probably have anywhere between 10 and 15 jobs as stagehands per show, but if you don't express your interest in the project or prove to them why you might be a good candidate for that project, there's no telling that you're going to be offered that job. So you still have to make sure that you're expressing your interest in a position and meeting with people and writing them emails or calling them and saying, hey, what do you have coming up? I'm looking for a new project. I've done a year with this. I want a new challenge in my life. I want to try something different. I heard you might have this tour. Are you looking for a carpenter? Are you looking for an electrician? Are you looking for, any job under the sun? The head carpenter on a road show is very similar to what a technical director job description would be. Head carpenter is the union term. Technical director is sort of the non-union term in terms of touring shows. The title changes, but the job description is exactly the same. You don't necessarily have a ton of input on specifically how things are going to be built in the shop, because the real world, as I've learned, how things happen is based on how much money the person you're working for has. Which sounds, maybe not the nicest thing to say, but ultimately that's kind of what drives our business. And if the producer has a ton of money to put into a project, you might get a more high-end shop that's available to build your show, or you might be able to use nicer materials, or you might be able to anything from building nicer set carts to using better hardware or latches or whatever it may be. But you can always have a bit of input on how you might like to see the show troop. So it kind of starts with a new production from drawings that are all done by a scenic designer or an associate scenic designer. And as those go to the shops, then the shop's own designers or engineers will break things down and say, we need to make this piece fit into a truck, obviously, so it can't be any larger than this, and it shouldn't weigh any more than this because it needs to be handled by guys and not used, picked up with chain hoists. So you can have a little bit of input along the way, but eventually, once the show is built and into the theater, it's your job to advance the show from city to city. So make sure that the markets you're going into know what you need for your labor calls. So how many carpenters, electricians, soundmen, prop men, wardrobe, how many people you need to move the show in and out of the venue, as well as run the show, what time you're showing up, how many trucks you're bringing, figure out in advance if there's anything specific you need to do or specific gear you need to book. Maybe you need to do something different because your show deck doesn't fit, so you have to build runoff, or there's a column in the middle of the stage right wing, and you don't want to chop up your deck, so you have to build decks around that to fit, or you need to make sure that someone schedules you forklifts so that you can get your gear off of the trucks if you can't ramp down, or just lots of variables that you kind of need to make sure that your head's going about 100 miles an hour looking at drawings of a building and comparing them to how your show might fit and things that are going to be specific challenges. And it's not only the head carpenter's position to do that. The other department heads on the tour should be advancing also their own part of the show. So the electrician should be calling the house electrician in the venue you're going into and say, hey, I need this on the balcony rail and this in the coves and this for box booms. Okay, you don't have box booms. Now what are we going to do? Or you don't have the ability to hang moving lights on the balcony rail. Where are we going to put them? And or you don't have a cove, or you don't have enough circuits. You have to find, what your problems are going to be before you get there. That way you're a little bit prepared. And if you have to rent additional gear, you can bring it in. And basically, so you're just not blindsided by the minute you walk in the door. Every theater has got its own little quirks, and there are some that are very similar across the country. You can tell they were built by the same company. Like in terms of the newer venues, there are consultants that get hired to help people figure out, we should put the door over here and this many docks and put power over here. And then you go into venues that were built 150 years ago and have been renovated 7 times, and there are things that still don't make sense, and the door's still too small, and there's still not enough power, and you have to know what you're in for. So each venue produces a technical packet, a tech pack is what we call it, and it lists all of the dimensions and the drawings, all the information that you really would want to know, the basic information you would want to know. And then beyond that, if you have specific questions, you need to call the technical director for the theater you're going into, and in the process of advancing labor, say, hey, I read this in the pack, is that really true? Okay, that is true, that's unfortunate, or great, awesome, that's not true, that's not going to be a problem. So it's, they're binders upon binders that are produced, a lot of it's online now, so that's very helpful.
It seems like you have to be on top of things. You also have to be creative and able to work with these things. Is that something that you learned here as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a brilliant time learning from Stephen Smith, and I always had a riot with him in the shop and watching him find ways around problems that he had, or designing things a little bit different, trying new things each time. Find a solution, yes, that works for the problem you have, but there's 6 ways to skin this cat. There's so many creative solutions that you can come up with in this theater, in our world. And that's actually one of my favorite things about touring, is that the guys in Chicago do things different than the guys in Orlando do them differently, than Dallas, than San Francisco, and they're all great solutions. They're just different. And you have to be open-minded to the idea that they're going to do it this way because that's how they always do it, and there's no sense in trying to teach them the way that you prefer. It's still going to get the job done, so that's kind of really fun. And you can pick and choose your own method. You might like something that you learned in Boston and like something that you learned in Denver and something that you also learned in Seattle. So as you troupe the show yourself, you can figure out which combination of those things works best for your tour. And then eventually, hopefully, 4 to 6 months down the road, if not sooner, you've kind of figured out which best combination works, and kind of helps to smooth the process out a little bit. The moving warhorse is kind of brutal. I guess I shouldn't say it's brutal, but it's definitely taxing. A weekend for us begins Friday with usually either a rehearsal or work call in the afternoon, and a show Friday night, and 2 shows Saturday, 2 shows Sunday. And show usually comes down about 9:30 is when loadout begins on Sunday nights, and it's anywhere between 6 and 8 hours to load Warhorse out right now into 9 trailers. So you get done about 3 or 4 in the morning and take a shower and get on the sleeper bus and wake up in the next city sometime around 10 or 11 a.m. and check into your hotel and crash out, take a nap for an hour, or go buy some groceries for your week ahead of yourself, and then head to the theater at 1 o'clock is usually when we start. So we've had between 4 a.m. and 1 p.m. away from the theater, which really isn't that much time. And then carpenters spend an hour doing what we call a spotting call, and you basically mark every point in the show in terms of rigging onto the floor. So you measure the room and you figure out exactly where the show needs to be. You establish 0-0 or the registration line, center line, make sure that everything is clearly marked on the deck with spike tape. And then we put about 65 little dots down on the ground that have there's a color code to them, and then there's also a description for what each point is for, if it's a 1-ton chain motor or a 2-ton, and which orientation it needs to be hung in, and what it's picking up, what it's holding, so that once all that information is relayed from the show rigger to the local riggers, that they can figure out the system themselves and be a little bit on autopilot, so they can just watch their boxes come in the door and figure out, okay, this is a pink box, so this goes onto a pink dot. We're going to hang this. And as the rest of the show then starts loading in at 2 p.m., we work for anywhere between 8 and 10 hours. Ideally, we go home at 11 p.m. If we have to, we work until midnight. And then back at 8 a.m. on Tuesday morning to do another 10 hours of work to go right into show call, which is usually about 6 or 6:30, depending upon the curtain time, and do a show at 7:30, 8 o'clock maybe, and walk away at between 10 and 11. So once Friday happens, it's pretty much downhill from there, and over. You're kind of absorbed into the show and moving the show and making sure that you get your rest while you can. And figure out what your game plan is going to be for the move. We have meetings on usually Saturday nights to discuss the upcoming move. If the electrics department has to do something different than what they typically do, that's their opportunity to tell everybody so that nobody's surprised on Sunday night when they feel like they're being inconvenienced by one department. That way there's a nice open line of communication, because that can really help everybody out. As long as you know that there's going to be a problem, there's going to be something that's different, as long as you're telling people in advance, I've found out that people are usually a little more adaptive to it, or not as upset, at least, hopefully. When the show's loaded in finally, and as long as there's not a pile of rehearsal that's been scheduled by stage management, we usually have Wednesday daytime, Thursday daytime, and if we're lucky, Friday the daytime off. Show call's usually not until 6 or 6:30, so you have your morning off and lunchtime and your afternoon off, which is kind of nice. People oftentimes just view that as, they on the road, it doesn't sound like a lot of time, and to people who aren't on the road, lots of times they just think, oh yeah, but all you have to do is go do your 4-hour show call. Well, sure, I have to do only my 4-hour show call, but as soon as I went to work on Friday night, I was at work until Tuesday night. So it's really not as much time off as you would hope. But I like to ride my bike. I travel a bike, so it's kind of a nice way to get away from the theater and go see the city and ride some trails, or even if it's just to ride down to the grocery store and pick up a half gallon of milk and a box of cereal. It's just a nice way to be able to get around the city and not have to walk everywhere or figure out how to get a cab or take the city bus, or it's your own little mode of transportation. So it's kind of nice, and it's also a good way for me to relax and get my head out of the show and out of the theater. I can leave the theater at night and get on my bike and go for a ride through the city if I want. And if it's a place, city I haven't been, it's kind of fun because you can stumble across things that you didn't know about. And if you have been there before, it's a good way to get to the sites that you want to go to and the sites that you want to see. Yeah, I usually just like to see what I stumble upon there. I toured with some people who are very adamant about researching the city we're going to, whether they've been there before or not, and figuring out, well, this is where I'm going to have breakfast on this day, and I want to go here for lunch because it's supposed to be great, and I want to go to this museum, and that's just oftentimes a lot of work, I think. So I enjoy just finding whatever I can find in a city, unless I know that I'm going to go be somewhere for a long time, then I'll really put a lot of work into it and figure it out. And sometimes, I had been fortunate enough to go to most of the big cities in the country and a lot of the smaller cities that I hope to never return to, but it's kind of fun to go, not necessarily have to know everything that you're going to do. My professional life gets to be really predictable. I know that I'm going to do the show 8 times this week, and then I have to move it, and I have a rehearsal. So if I can just kind of wander about the city aimlessly, sort of in a sense, it kind of is a nice disconnect. So.
Nice change of pace.
Yeah, absolutely. Baseball games are great to go to on the road. We don't really get to see basketball or football or hockey because there's not really many day games, but we get to see some afternoon baseball games and get in for cheap and sit out in the cheap seats and have a hot dog. It's pretty great, That's kind of a fun activity to do. Or sometimes people will schedule like a vineyard tour if we're in California and we know we have Monday off. If we're fortunate enough to be in a city for more than 1 week, we have what we call golden days, where there's no work and there's no travel. So you have basically from the time the show comes down on Sunday night until you have to go back to work on Tuesday evening. So you get pretty close to 2 days off. It's pretty awesome. It's kind of nice. I recently on this tour was really surprised by Columbus, Ohio. I didn't think I was going to be that surprised by it. I knew I wasn't really going to like the theater, but I had a great time in the city, and I liked how it was laid out and how the neighborhoods felt and how the shops were, the different restaurants or bars or where the bike trails were. So that was a fun little surprise. And where else most recently? I really like, we were in Boise, Idaho, actually. We teched in and rehearsed the show for the beginning of the tour in Boise, Idaho. And that's a fun city. It kind of gets forgotten about, but it's a big college town, and there's a lot of like farm-to-table restaurants that are around. There's a bunch of little microbrews and little local distilleries, and there's also a bunch of bike shops, so that always keeps me entertained. It's a good crowd, too. Good people, good weather. I originally said that I would tour for 5 years, and that has come and gone. And I don't really know what else I'll do right now. So I currently don't have any jobs lined up for this fall, but I'm looking for work in the touring world. I'm trying to see if I can branch into the rock and roll arena world a little bit, just to give it a whirl. See if I like it. I probably won't because it's kind of uncivilized compared to Broadway, but I'd like to try it. We'll see what happens. If I find a job in a city that I really enjoy, or if I have a reason to settle down, if I have a dog or a girlfriend or something that might give me, lead me to not wanting to be on the road all the time, then it sort of will be the motivation. But right now I enjoy being on the road. I like touring. I like meeting all sorts of new people in every city, and that kind of keeps things fun and interesting for me right now. It's also very I guess how to say this. It's a job that it can pay very well, and the benefit structure is done very well, and a lot of that is based on the compensation that you have to sacrifice a lot. You have to be gone for 9 months in a row. I mean, I got home on July 2nd, and the time before that I was home in October, so for 4 days. And before that it was April. So when when you're gone for 6 to 9 months on end, it's nice to know that you have a nice benefits package and you have a vacation pay built in, and you're being compensated for sacrificing not being able to go to a family member's wedding or a funeral or birthdays, or even just having your weekends to yourself and to go kayaking with your friends. So, yeah, I enjoy touring. I really do. I will be the first person to say that I didn't think in a million years I would have gone to school here in Mankato, Minnesota. But it was a really great thing for me. I think that the department was run very well while I was here. I think the department provides for a lot of opportunities for students, whether they think that they want to be a lighting designer or a technical director or a costumer or pattern draper. The department requires you to try your hand at everything. And I didn't necessarily appreciate that or think that was a good idea at the time, but I did it anyway. And now one of my favorite things about being at work on the road is that I remember those things and those skill sets that I learned and how I was forced to be a part of those activities. And it makes me excited then when I'm at work to say, oh yeah, I've done this before, or it also kind of instills your interest in theater as a collaborative art, which I think is really kind of a cool thing, because there aren't many other professions that I can think of that are so intertwined together, and people have their own specific skill sets, but they need everybody to be good at their job, and they need everybody to, to be emotionally invested and in the product at hand. And I think that's definitely something that you learn here at MSU, which is great. I think it's really important. There's also a ton of opportunities too. I mean, there's so much going on in this department, which might be a little overwhelming at times, I think, for everybody, whether it's students or faculty. But I think that's a good thing, because you have to hustle in this business. You have to be willing to put yourself out there and apply for jobs you maybe aren't necessarily qualified for, or jobs that you don't think you have a shot at. But to know that there are those opportunities available to you, I think is a great thing. I think that's definitely something that you can learn here at MSU.
All right.